I didn't cry when my husband said it. That's the part that still surprises me when I replay that night in my head. We had just come back from dinner at his father's house, the kind of dinner that feels less like a meal and more like a performance. The table had been set with intention. Every dish arrived in perfect sequence, warm, polished, impressive. His father's new wife moved through the kitchen like she was on display, calm, composed, smiling at exactly the right moments. My husband watched her all evening with an admiration he didn't bother to hide. I noticed it, but I didn't say anything. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I was imagining things. The moment we stepped into our apartment, the silence felt heavier than it should have. Nothing was wrong with our place. It looked like a home where two people actually lived, shoes by the door, a jacket tossed over the chair, dishes from that morning drying on the rack. Normal, real. He stood there for a second looking around. Then he sighed. Not tired, not stressed. Disappointed. What? I asked, already exhausted, already bracing myself. He shook his head like I wouldn't understand. Nothing. It's just being over there reminds me what a real home could look like. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? He turned to me then, finally. She puts in effort. The details, the presentation. You don't even try anymore. I felt my pulse slow instead of spike. My hands went cold, but my voice stayed steady. I reminded him I worked 50 hours a week, that I handled the bills, that I paid for his truck, that I cooked most nights, that I kept our lives running. He cut me off with a frustrated wave of his hand. That's the problem. She never lists what she does. She just does it with grace. There it was, the comparison, sharpened. And then he said the sentence I will never unhear. You're not half the woman my dad's new wife is. Honestly, it's embarrassing. I stared at him, waiting for something. Regret, hesitation, a sign he wanted to take it back. It never came. Instead, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Not relief, not anger, clarity. In that moment, I understood something with terrifying precision. My husband wasn't just criticizing me. He was telling me exactly how little he valued the life I'd been holding together for both of us. And I listened. When I think back to the beginning, that's what makes everything hurt more. The fact that this wasn't always who we were. We met through mutual friends at a birthday dinner, one of those long tables where conversations overlap and wine keeps getting refilled. He sat across from me, leaning in when I spoke, laughing easily, asking questions that felt genuine. Not performative, not competitive, just present. By the end of the night, he walked me to my car and asked if he could call me the next day. I remember thinking how refreshingly uncomplicated that felt. We dated for 2 years, slow, steady years. We weren't dramatic. We didn't fight loudly. We built routines, Sunday grocery trips, late-night takeout on the couch, shared playlists for road trips. When he proposed, it wasn't flashy. Just us, quiet, honest. I said yes without hesitation. We got married in a small ceremony surrounded by friends and family. Nothing extravagant, nothing curated for display. I thought that was the point. I thought we were choosing substance over show. For a long time, it worked. I built my career as a paralegal at a busy firm. Long hours, demanding deadlines, a commute that ate up almost an hour and a half of my day. He bounced between jobs more than he liked to admit. When his credit issues surfaced early on, I didn't judge him. I helped. I co-signed. I took on more because that's what partners do, or at least that's what I believed. Then his parents' marriage imploded. His father divorced his mother after 31 years. The reason came out quickly and painfully, an affair with a woman 15 years younger. I watched my mother-in-law unravel in real time. I stayed with her on nights when she couldn't sleep, helped her organize paperwork, sat with her while she cried over memories that suddenly felt fraudulent. My husband was furious at first. He didn't speak to his father for months. I thought that meant something. I thought it said something about his values. Then, 6 months after the divorce, his father married the woman he'd cheated with. That was when everything subtly shifted. My husband started visiting them again, slowly at first, then often. Every visit came with stories, how calm the house felt, how good the food was, how put together everything seemed. I listened without comment. I told myself it was just him rebuilding a relationship with his dad. But admiration turned into comparison. Comments slipped into conversation like they belonged there. Why don't you make things from scratch? Did you notice how she always looks polished? She wakes up early to work out, She has time for details. Each remark landed softly, but they stacked up. And I kept absorbing them because that's what I'd always done. Adjusted, compensated, smoothed the edges. What I didn't realize then was that somewhere along the way, my husband stopped seeing our life as shared reality and started measuring it against someone else's performance. By the time he said I wasn't half the woman she was, the foundation had already been cracked for months. I just hadn't let myself see it yet. The warning signs didn't arrive all at once. They slipped in quietly, disguised as casual observations, said in a tone that suggested concern rather than criticism. At first, it was almost subtle. "Did you notice how she had appetizers ready the second we walked in?" he said one night on the drive home. His eyes stayed on the road, like the comment wasn't meant to land anywhere. "That's what hosting looks like." I hummed noncommittally, watching the streetlights blur past my window. I didn't want to argue over something that felt so small. I told myself he was just talking. Then it happened again. "She makes homemade pasta twice a week," he said another time, scrolling through his phone. "Not box stuff, like from scratch." I laughed lightly. "She doesn't work." He shrugged. "Still, effort matters." That word, effort, started appearing everywhere. Effort in how the table looked. Effort in how she dressed, even at home. Effort in how she planned meals, how she spoke to his dad, how she made everything look seamless. Every comment was framed as admiration, but admiration has a shadow. And slowly, I realized where that shadow was falling. On me. I started noticing how often he compared without using my name. Some women just, she always, a real wife would. I noticed how he stopped thanking me for the things I did. The bills paid on time. The groceries stocked. The truck payment that quietly left my account every month. The credit card balance I managed so his credit score could slowly climb out of the hole it had been in when we met. Instead, he watched me like I was falling short of something he'd never fully explained. One night, I came home late from work, exhausted, shoulders aching, brain buzzing with deadlines. I kicked off my shoes and headed straight for the couch. He glanced at the empty stove. "No dinner?" "I worked 12 hours today," I said, rubbing my temples. "There's leftovers in the fridge." He sighed, again with the sighs. "She always plans ahead." Something tight twisted in my chest. "She also has a housekeeper 3 days a week." He frowned. "That's not the point." But it was the point. I just wasn't allowed to say it. The more I tried to explain my reality, the more he framed it as defensiveness, as keeping score, as lacking grace. "You're always listing what you do," he said once, irritation sharp in his voice. "She just does it, quietly." I wanted to ask him if he knew what quiet labor looked like, if he understood how much effort goes into making a life function without applause. But every time I opened my mouth, I felt myself shrinking instead. So I adapted. I meal prepped more. I cleaned when I was already tired. I smiled through comparisons I pretended not to hear. I told myself this phase would pass. What I didn't know was that while I was trying harder, he was drifting further, building an ideal in his head that no real working woman could compete with. By the time we walked into our apartment that night, and he sighed in disappointment, the comparison had already solidified into judgment. The comment didn't come out of nowhere. It was the inevitable result of months of quiet erosion, and I had been standing in the path of it the entire time, hoping it would stop on its own. It didn't. Last Thursday wasn't supposed to be different from any other visit. We went to his father's house for dinner, like we had been doing more often lately. I remember standing in front of my closet, already tired, choosing something simple that still looked professional. I didn't have the energy to compete with someone who treated dinner like a staged production. The house looked exactly the way I expected when we arrived, immaculate in a way that didn't feel lived in. Candles already lit, music low and tasteful, the table set with matching linens, folded napkins, wine glasses positioned just so. His father's new wife greeted us with a warm smile and a kiss on the cheek, like we were guests on a lifestyle channel. Dinner itself was impressive. Beef Wellington, cooked perfectly, homemade bread, still warm. 3 desserts arranged on matching plates. Everyone praised her, my husband especially. He leaned forward when she spoke, laughed at her jokes, asked questions about how she planned everything so effortlessly. I ate quietly, smiling when appropriate, nodding when spoken to. I told myself none of this mattered. I reminded myself that this was not real life. It was a performance supported by money, time, and hired help. Still, I felt myself shrinking. On the drive home, my body felt heavy, like I'd been holding tension in my muscles without realizing it. I stared out the window, counting streetlights, already bracing myself. The apartment door closed behind us with a familiar click. Our place smelled faintly like laundry detergent and coffee grounds. Comfortable, normal. He didn't say anything at first, just looked around. Then he sighed. It wasn't dramatic, that made it worse. "What?" I asked, setting my bag down, my voice already tired. He hesitated like he was weighing whether to be honest. "Nothing. It's just, being over there reminds me what a real home could look like." I turned to face him. "What does that mean?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "She puts in effort, the details, the presentation. You don't even try anymore." Something in me went very still. "I work 50 hours a week," I said, keeping my tone calm. "I commute 45 minutes each way. I manage our bills. I pay for your truck. I cook most nights." He threw his hands up. "See, this is what I mean. She never lists what she does. She just does it. With grace. You're always keeping score." "Because someone has to," I said, "or nothing gets paid." That's when his face changed. His jaw tightened, eyes hardening, like he'd finally decided to stop filtering himself. "You're not half the woman my dad's new wife is," he said. "Honestly, I don't know what happened to you, but it's embarrassing." The words landed cleanly. No yelling, no backtracking. I stared at him. My husband of 6 years. The man I'd supported through job losses, financial messes, his parents' divorce. The man who had leaned on me while quietly resenting me. For a moment, I felt nothing. Then I smiled. Not because it was funny. Because something inside me finally clicked into place. "Maybe you should go live with them," I said evenly. "Since she's so amazing." He rolled his eyes. "Don't be dramatic." "I'm not," I replied. "I'm serious. If that's the standard, I can't meet it. Go live there." He laughed, actually laughed, like I'd told a joke. "Whatever, I'm going to bed." He walked past me and disappeared into the bedroom. I stayed in the living room, standing perfectly still, listening to the quiet hum of the apartment. My hands trembled slightly, but my mind was clear in a way it hadn't been in years. By the time I went to bed, I had already made a decision. Not a dramatic one, a practical one. And the next morning, everything began to change. I woke up before my alarm the next morning, the apartment still dark and quiet. For a few seconds, I lay there listening to my own breathing, waiting for the familiar rush of anxiety to hit. It didn't. Instead, there was a strange calm in my chest, steady, deliberate, the kind of calm that comes after a decision has already been made. I got out of bed without waking him, made coffee for myself only. The kitchen light felt too bright, like it was exposing something new. I stood at the counter, mug warming my hands, replaying his words from the night before. Not in a spiral, just acknowledging them. When he finally shuffled into the kitchen, hair messy, eyes half open, he glanced at the empty stove. "No breakfast?" I took a sip of my coffee. "I'm not half the woman your stepmom is, remember? I'm sure she'd make you something." He frowned, clearly thrown off. "Are you still mad about that?" "I'm not mad," I said honestly. "I'm adjusting." He scoffed and grabbed his keys. "You'll get over it." The door closed behind him, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the urge to chase after him, to explain, to smooth things over, to make sure the emotional temperature stayed comfortable. Instead, I opened my laptop. At work that day, I moved through my tasks with focused precision. During my lunch break, I called my bank. My voice didn't shake when I canceled the automatic payment for his truck. The loan was in my name, but the vehicle was his. I'd been paying $487 a month for 4 years out of loyalty. That loyalty had expired. Next, I stopped at the grocery store. I didn't wander the aisles like I used to, mentally planning meals for 2. I bought food for 1. Simple, intentional. When I got home later, I meal prepped and labeled each container with my name. His side of the fridge remained empty. That evening, I texted my mother-in-law. A simple check-in. We'd stayed close despite everything. She deserved honesty, even if I wasn't ready to tell the whole story yet. Then I did something else, something that felt almost indulgent. I hired a cleaning service to come once a week, for my spaces only, living room, my home office, my bathroom. His mess, his responsibility. When he came home that night, the apartment felt different, not hostile, just separate. "What's for dinner?" he asked, standing in the kitchen. "Whatever you make," I said, turning a page in my book. "Or order. Or eat at your dad's." He stared at me. "You're being petty." I looked up, meeting his eyes. I thought I was being graceful, no scorekeeping, just acceptance. He ordered pizza, ate it alone. The sound of chewing echoed awkwardly in the kitchen. I went to bed early, locked the door, put on a sheet mask, and let myself exist without managing his feelings for once. The days that followed were uncomfortable for him. Laundry piled up in the spare bathroom. The apartment got messier on his side. I didn't touch it. His truck payment came due on the 15th. He didn't pay it. The credit card payment followed. Missed. By day 10, the confusion had curdled into anger. "What is your problem?" he snapped. "You're acting like a child." I set my fork down slowly. "I'm acting like someone who heard her husband clearly. You want someone who does everything with grace and silence. That's not me." He scoffed. "You're really going to let things fall apart like this?" "No," I said calmly. "I'm letting you experience what it looks like without my labor holding everything together." He stormed out that night, slamming the door. I assumed he went to a bar. I was wrong. He went to his father's house. And that was when the consequences stopped being theoretical. I didn't know where he had gone that night until the next morning. He came home late, quiet, and slept on the couch. I noticed because I heard the cushions shift sometime after midnight, the low click of the lamp turning off. I didn't get up. I didn't ask. For once, I let silence sit where explanations usually lived. The explanation arrived anyway. It came from my mother-in-law. She called me mid-morning while I was at work, her voice measured in that careful way she used when she didn't want to sound alarmed. "I don't want to overstep," she said, "but I think you should know. He went to his dad's last night." I exhaled slowly. "Did he stay?" "No," she said, "not for lack of trying." That was the first crack. Apparently, his father's new wife had welcomed him warmly at first, made him a late-night snack, let him vent. According to my sister-in-law, who still spoke to their dad occasionally, my husband talked for nearly an hour about how I'd changed, how I didn't feel like a real wife anymore, how he just wanted to come home to something peaceful. She nodded along, my mother-in-law said, very sympathetic, very understanding. Of course she did. Encouraged by that validation, he asked if he could stay with them for a while, just temporarily, just until I came to my senses. That was when the tone shifted. There was a pause, long enough to be uncomfortable. His father looked to his new wife. She smiled, a precise, controlled smile. "Oh, honey," she said, "we love having you visit, but we're still newlyweds. We really need our space." Translation: You're welcome to admire from a distance, not live here. My husband tried again, said it wouldn't be long, said he just needed a break. His father stepped in then. "Son, you need to work things out with your wife. That's what marriage is." The hypocrisy was almost impressive. He came home that night with nowhere else to go. The next morning, reality arrived on schedule. His phone rang while he was getting ready for work. I watched his face change as he listened, confusion turning into panic. "They're saying my truck payment was missed," he said, holding the phone out like I'd caused the problem by proximity alone. "Why didn't you pay it?" "Because it's your truck," I replied evenly. "I've been paying it out of generosity. That generosity ended." "You're going to let it get repossessed?" His voice cracked. "I'm going to let you handle your own responsibilities." He called his father, asked for a loan. His father said he'd think about it. He called his mother. She didn't hesitate. "Maybe if you hadn't compared your wife to your father's mistress, you wouldn't be in this situation." I almost smiled when he relayed that one. Over the next week, everything tightened. The missed truck payment triggered late fees. The credit card, still in my name, with him as an authorized user, went unpaid. When he tried to log in to manage it, he realized he couldn't. The account was tied to my email. "You're ruining my credit," he accused. "Your credit was already ruined," I said. "I was rebuilding it for you." I offered to transfer the account fully into his name. That would remove him from my credit entirely. He went quiet when he realized what that meant. "I can't afford all of this," he admitted finally. "Then prioritize," I said. "Sell the truck. Ask your dad. Ask your stepmom." At the mention of her, something shifted in his face. He looked away. "She won't help," he said quietly. I raised an eyebrow. "You asked her for money?" "I mentioned I was struggling," he said. "She said they're on a fixed budget because of renovations." "A fixed budget? With a housekeeper 3 days a week. Now you see it," I said gently. "She's not your safety net. She's a performance." That realization hit him harder than any argument I could have made. He sat down heavily, staring at the wall like it might explain something. "What am I supposed to do?" he asked. "That's not my job anymore," I said. "You made it clear I'm not the woman you want." We stopped being a couple after that conversation. We became two people sharing space, sharing history, but not sharing labor. He slept on the couch. I lived in my routines. The tension was constant, thick, unavoidable. And then the truck was repossessed. It happened on a Tuesday morning while he was at work. A coworker called him to say a tow truck was hooking up his vehicle in the parking lot. He called me, frantic, voice breaking. "You have to help me," he begged. "I need this truck." "How is that my responsibility?" I asked. "This is happening because of you." "No," I said. "This is happening because you confuse support with entitlement." He went back to his father again. This time, he got a loan, with interest. His own father charged him interest. When he told me, I just nodded. The escalation wasn't loud anymore. It was methodical. And it was only gaining momentum. The lowest point didn't come with yelling. It came quietly, wrapped in embarrassment and realization. By the time his truck was repossessed, something in him had already collapsed. He moved through the apartment like a guest who'd overstayed his welcome. Careful, stiff, unsure where to put himself. The confidence he used to carry, even when he had nothing to back it up, was gone. In its place was a tight, brittle energy, like glass under pressure. He started working extra shifts, selling things he used to brag about owning, watching every dollar in a way he never had before, because now there was no buffer, no silent safety net absorbing the consequences of his choices. And still it wasn't enough. The credit card fell further behind. His father called more often, asking about repayment. The tone shifted from concerned to irritated. His stepmom, the woman he'd held up as the gold standard, stopped asking how he was doing altogether. That was when my sister-in-law called me. "Please don't tell him I told you," she said immediately. Her voice dropped. "But I think you deserve to know." She told me his stepmother had been talking, a lot, to friends, to extended family, to anyone who would listen, calling me lazy, saying I was ruining her stepson's life, suggesting I must be cheating, because why else would a wife stop taking care of her husband? I sat there holding my phone, stunned, not hurt, just fascinated. This woman had barely spoken to me beyond pleasantries, had never asked about my job, my life, my marriage. Yet somehow she'd constructed an entire narrative where she was the standard and I was the failure. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't defend myself. I waited. The next week was my father-in-law's birthday, a family gathering at their house. My husband wanted to go, wanted me to go with him. "We should show up together," he said carefully. "Present a united front." I looked at him, really looked at him, at the exhaustion etched into his face, the fear underneath his words. "Why would I go somewhere I've been publicly trashed by the hostess?" I asked. He froze. "She didn't—" "She did," I said. "Your sister told me." His shoulders dropped. "I didn't know." "I know," I replied. "That's part of the problem." He went alone. What happened at that party came back to me in fragments, stitched together by different voices. Apparently, his stepmom put on a show, concerned, sympathetic, asking about me loudly enough for others to hear. "How's your wife?" she'd said. Marriage can be so hard when one partner isn't pulling their weight. For once, my husband tried. He said I'd been under a lot of stress, that he'd said things he shouldn't have. She touched his arm gently. "Some women just aren't cut out for traditional roles. It's not your fault." And then my mother-in-law walked in. No one had told the stepmom she'd be there. The room went silent. My mother-in-law didn't raise her voice. She didn't hesitate either. She smiled and said calmly, "It's interesting to hear you talk about traditional roles. Tell me, what's traditional about sleeping with a married man for 3 years before he leaves his family?" The fallout was immediate. Voices raised. My father-in-law trying to intervene. The stepmom crying and locking herself in the bathroom. The party ending early, awkwardly, irrevocably. Before my mother-in-law left, she turned to my husband and said, "Your wife has done more for you in 6 years than that woman ever will. Think about that." He came home looking hollow. "I messed up," he said quietly. I nodded. "Yeah." He sat down and cried. Real tears. The kind that come from losing something you didn't realize was holding you upright. I didn't comfort him. I didn't leave either. I just sat there, letting him finally feel the full weight of what he'd broken. Because this wasn't about the truck, or the money, or even the comparison. It was the moment he realized the woman he idolized wouldn't even let him sleep in her house, and the woman he'd dismissed had been carrying him the entire time. That was the darkest moment for him. For me, it was clarity. And once clarity arrives, nothing ever looks the same again. 3 months passed before the dust settled enough for the truth to stand on its own. By then, we weren't really living together anymore, not in any meaningful sense. We shared an address, not a life. He slept on the couch until one night he didn't. He packed a duffel bag and told me he'd found a room to rent from a coworker. "I need space to figure things out," he said. I nodded. So do I. The separation wasn't dramatic. No slammed doors, No threats, just the quiet acknowledgement that what we had was already broken. Marriage counseling was his idea. That surprised me. I agreed, not because I believed it would fix us, but because I needed to hear certain things said out loud in a room where they couldn't be minimized. Our therapist was a woman in her 60s, sharp-eyed, direct, not interested in performance. In our third session, she looked at him and asked, "What did you expect from your wife?" He hesitated, listed things without realizing what he was revealing: a stable income, financial management, emotional support, a clean home, meals, grace, silence. She nodded slowly, then turned to him again. "So you wanted her to work full-time, manage all finances, and also perform the role of a stay-at-home spouse?" He blinked. "I guess when you put it that way." "I'm putting it the only way it can be put," she said. She asked him to list every financial contribution he'd made in the last 4 years. He struggled. The list was short, uncomfortable. She looked at me then, not sympathetically, not accusingly, just factual. "You were supporting him," she said, "while being criticized for not doing enough." He looked sick. "I didn't realize," he said quietly. "You didn't want to," she replied. Outside therapy, consequences continued to unfold. His credit was worse than before. His father wanted repayment, with interest, and reminded him of it regularly. His stepmom had grown distant, cold. According to his sister, she'd stopped inviting him over. The family image had cracked, and he was no longer useful to maintain it. Meanwhile, something unexpected happened on the other side. The housekeeper at his father's place was let go. Renovations had gone over budget. Suddenly, the woman who did everything from scratch was actually doing everything herself. She struggled, burned dinner, set off the smoke alarm, complained loudly. The performance didn't survive real life. My husband admitted something during one session that shifted everything. "I was jealous," he said. "After the divorce, my dad was miserable. Then suddenly he's happy, traveling, smiling. I wanted that. I wanted you to make me feel like that." "So you wanted me to become someone else?" I said quietly. He nodded. "I compared you to a performance." That was the truth. Plain, undeniable. Here's where the power shifted. I stopped waiting to see what he would do next. I focused on me. I got a promotion at work, signed up for pottery classes on Tuesday nights, reconnected with friends I'd neglected because I was too busy being everything at home. My mother-in-law and I grew closer. We had lunch regularly. She was thriving. New condo, new routines, a life that belonged to her again. "I spent 30 years trying to be perfect for a man who didn't appreciate it," she told me once. "Don't do that." I wasn't. For the first time in years, I wasn't shrinking. I wasn't competing. I wasn't performing. And I realized something important. The turning point wasn't him apologizing. It was me no longer needing him to understand in order to move forward. Power didn't come from confrontation. It came from withdrawal. And once I reclaimed it, there was no going back. The consequences didn't arrive all at once. They came in waves, quiet at first, then relentless. Once my husband moved out, the illusion that any of this was temporary disappeared. There was no one left to blame, no one left to lean on. Every problem landed exactly where it belonged. His financial reality closed in quickly. The interest-bearing loan from his father loomed over him like a countdown. Each reminder text carried an edge, less concern, more expectation. His stepmom stopped asking how he was doing altogether. According to my sister-in-law, she'd started framing him as dramatic and unstable, distancing herself from the mess she'd helped create by feeding his ego when it suited her. The irony wasn't lost on him. He told me once, during a counseling session, "She doesn't answer my messages anymore." I didn't respond. Because what was there to say? Performances don't offer support when the audience leaves. His father wasn't much better. The man who lectured him about responsibility now monitored repayments like a creditor. Family dinners became tense. Conversations transactional. The warmth my husband thought he'd witnessed had been conditional all along. Meanwhile, the truth about his stepmom continued to unravel socially. Word travels fast in families like that. Stories didn't line up. People noticed the cracks. The woman who once spoke loudly about traditional roles was now struggling to manage her own home without hired help. The contrast between image and reality became harder to ignore. And then there was my mother-in-law. She flourished. She bought herself a small condo, started a book club, reconnected with friends she'd neglected for decades. Watching her rebuild was grounding. Proof that life didn't end because someone decided you weren't enough. My husband felt that shift acutely. In one session, he admitted, "I lost everything chasing something that wasn't real." He wasn't just talking about the truck. The marriage counseling continued, but the tone changed. Less defensiveness, more accountability. He apologized, often, and in different ways. I believed he meant it. But remorse doesn't erase damage. "I'm trying to be better," he told me one afternoon. "I'm working on my finances, therapy, all of it." "I see that," I said honestly. "What does that mean for us?" I took a breath. "It means I'm not rushing." That frustrated him more than anger ever could have. There was no timeline to argue against, no emotion to push back on. The fallout wasn't just his. Friends noticed the change in me. I was lighter, less apologetic, more present. My life no longer revolved around managing someone else's comfort. And the biggest fallout of all? The comparison ended. Not because he stopped making it, but because it stopped mattering. He could finally see his stepmom for what she was. Someone who curated moments, not someone who sustained a life. Someone who excelled at being admired, not at being relied upon. And he had to live with the knowledge that he'd traded stability for illusion. I had to live with something else. The understanding that love without respect turns into labor, and labor without appreciation becomes resentment. By the time the dust settled, the question wasn't whether he'd learned his lesson. It was whether I still wanted to build a future with someone who needed to lose everything to understand my worth. That answer wasn't ready yet, but the truth was clear. The fallout had done what confrontation never could. It had stripped everything down to reality, and reality finally wasn't negotiable. I'm not writing this from a place of anger anymore. That surprised me the most. 3 months after everything fell apart, my husband sent me a message I still haven't answered. "I'm sorry I ever made you feel less than. You're worth more than I realized. I'm trying to become someone who deserves you." I believe he means it. But belief doesn't automatically rebuild trust. We're still separated, not legally, but in every way that matters. He's living on his own, managing his own finances, answering for his own mistakes. For the first time since I've known him, he's fully responsible for his life. Therapy, budgeting, consequences, no buffer, no silent rescue. As for me, I'm good. Not fine, not getting by. Good. I pay my own bills. I come home to a space that reflects my energy, not someone else's expectations. I answer to no one who doesn't respect the reality of my life. I've stopped trying to shrink myself to fit a fantasy that was never meant for a real woman. Here's the lesson I learned the hard way. Comparison isn't harmless. When someone compares you to a performance, they're not asking you to improve. They're asking you to disappear and be replaced by an illusion. And the moment you accept that standard, you lose yourself trying to meet something that doesn't exist. I stopped cooking, cleaning, and paying his bills, not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. I needed to draw a boundary that said, "This is where my labor ends if you can't value it." His response, running to the very woman he'd held up as superior, only to be turned away, confirmed everything I needed to know. She never cared about him. She cared about how things looked, about the image of the perfect family, the adoring stepson, the validation. When real life demanded real support, she vanished. That's the difference between performance and partnership. I don't know if my husband and I will make it. I'm not ruling it out, and I'm not promising it either. Some things can be repaired. Others leave cracks you learn to live with or walk away from. But I know this for certain. I don't need to be half of anyone. Not his dream woman. Not his stepmom's standard. Not a comparison point in someone else's story. I am my own measure, and that is more than enough.